Clayton, Sayfie, and Anthony Broome with the Wolverine.com here in downtown Los Angeles. Again, we just got off the practice field at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, home of the Los Angeles Chargers and the Los Angeles Rams. Michigan moving practice there. Today looked like there was rain in the forecast yesterday, so they decided to move it inside, and what a cool experience being in that stadium. But we got some observations from practice as well. Start with the health, as is kind of the top storyline. Pretty much everybody of note was out there, moving around, doing their thing. Michigan looks fully healthy heading into this game. As we mentioned on yesterday's video, a lot of guys were banged up towards the end of the year, so that is good to see. Anthony, you were keeping a closer eye on the defense, so let's start with that and kind of what you saw. We also spoke to whoever we wanted to earlier in the day outside of the Rose Bowl Stadium for Rose Bowl Media Day, so we'll talk a little bit in a second about what we learned there. But you were keen on the defense. Again, caveat, we didn't see much. We got 20 minutes about, and look, some of it was stretching, some of it was some pretty light drills. But what did you see from the defense?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, everyone does look healthy, which is a positive. Again, yesterday we were there. We saw the bigger guys have the shoulder pads on, but shorts. Today, everyone in shorts and their practice jersey with helmets on. So, again, the idea that they are still taking this light during bowl prep, maybe taking it light isn't the word, but, more of the mental stuff, the technique, the little nitty-gritty and the details. That's what we saw from them on the practice field today. Again, it was just drill work. You get to SoFi Stadium, they start the clock. We're allowed to be there for 15 minutes, so about half of that was them stretching, which, again, that's more just to see who's there. Everyone's there and accounted for. Defensively, talking to Chris Jenkins earlier, something that Michigan wants to prove in this game is that they have those SEC caliber athletes and the depth on the defensive side of the ball, the physicality too. That's probably one of the bigger keys in this game is how you hold up in a fist fight, because this is, the SEC, that's a whole different ball game than a lot of these teams that they see in the Big Ten. So, again, from that, not a ton to glean from practice other than it's loose. I was watching Rick Minner coach the linebackers. It looks like those guys have really taken to what he's brought to the table. I was watching Mike Elston do some work with the guys, Dylan Roney doing some work with the guys as well, the edge guys. Everything looks about as routine, but as with a little pep in your step as it can, especially, again, for the second day in a row, Jim Harbaugh. We don't ever get to watch them practice at all. Mm-hmm. So to see him on the practice field, a comment you've made a ton of times is that's probably where Jim Harbaugh is most in his element. So to see that, to me, is maybe refreshing is not the word, but pretty cool to see.
Yeah, so we were out there yesterday at kind of where they've been training all week at that home of the LA Galaxy. This one, maybe it was the change in venue going to SoFi Stadium. One of the coolest stadiums probably in the country. Yeah. But I just had this feeling, maybe just the vibe, that, like, the game is nearing, and it is nearing. But you could just kind of feel, I don't know, just it was nothing really that they were doing differently. It was just kind of my feeling of, like, reading the situation. And we're sitting here, and I'm getting excited just talking about it, the fact that we're just 2 days away from toe meeting leather in the Rose Bowl, Michigan and Alabama. I watched the offense, specifically honing in a little bit more on the quarterbacks, wide receivers. They had some routes on air. Everything looks about as expected. Crisp routes from especially the guys who are going to play, which is good news, and throws from J.J. McCarthy, starting quarterback. Jack Tuttle, you can tell he's definitely the second best quarterback on this team, threw some nice balls. I was watching Alex Orji throw. I know it was routes on air. I know that, a lot of guys can look good in shorts and all that, and he's an impressive athlete. We already knew that, but he was throwing some nice balls out there. Jim Harbaugh said earlier this week that he could see Alex Orji being a guy who competes for the job next year, depending on what J.J. McCarthy does. Those were his exact words, and I could see it. He intrigues me as a quarterback with what he can do in the run game. You would have to kind of change your offense a little bit, maybe go a little bit more Ravens, and Jim could certainly do that, and the coaches that he has on staff here. But it's just something I was thinking about while watching these guys run around. But yeah, everybody healthy, which was good to see. As we mentioned, we were able to talk to a lot of these guys earlier on in the day in this big tent in the parking lot of the Rose Bowl. What was the biggest thing or a couple things that you picked up there that were interesting to you?
First and foremost, the tent wasn't big enough. A little claustrophobic up there.
150 guys.
Yeah. Again, just a you get the vibe, we've used this term before too, that it is a loose but confident and business-like group. The guys that we talked to, Blake Corum was at a podium, Chris Jenkins, obviously Jim Harbaugh podium session, Mikey Sainristil still was up there. J.J. McCarthy probably had the biggest crowd, and rightfully so. He's the starting quarterback. You get the sense that these guys, specifically a guy I was honing in on was Blake Corum. I was in front of his session for about 20 minutes or so, and he was the guy that's saying, this time last year he was in L.A., but it's because he was having surgery on his knee. He was doing, the treatment, the process that he needed to do to rehab. So he said, this is his third time in L.A., but the first time that that he's going to play a football game, which, of course, if things had gone differently last year, that national title game would have been at SoFi Stadium where we just came from. So, to me, I got, hearing from Blake Corum, the growth that he's had this year, not just as a player, but as a human being. I know Sharon Moore said earlier this week, it looks like over the last few weeks that Corum has put on a little more muscle, hasn't been getting fat and happy, to quote Chris Ballas and Doug Skeen. But these guys are ready to roll. And the other thing that strikes me too is that, again, they would trade anything in the world for a win in those games the last 2 years. But I think a lot of these guys realize too that there's something to be said about making that climb, but also how you respond to getting knocked down a few pegs. And to this team's credit, this is the third year in a row in the playoffs, second year, though, where they found a way to work themselves back into playoff contention. And they feel like there have been a lot of lessons learned. We'll see if the lack of physicality plays a factor. I would assume, I don't know how Alabama's been practicing, but I could see there being a little bit of rust early on in the Rose Bowl. But, again, this is going to be a heavyweight fight where I think both of these teams are going to want to get out to a fast start, but maybe have their issues doing so given the layoff.
Yeah, that part of it is going to be interesting. I feel like either way, they weren't going to be in pads really this week while they're out here. I think a lot of that was probably when they were back in Ann Arbor, but it will just be interesting to see how some of these adjustments paid off, because it felt like last year Michigan decided to just kind of dive back in, do what they want, just focus all on football. I was talking to Jalen Harrell about that today, and how they were supposed to go to Top Golf last year and all the starters stayed back. He said, I didn't really care. Like, I didn't need to go to Top Golf. But he said there's kind of just this shift where some of them were at the Clippers game last night, more were at the Lakers game the night before. Not that they're not preparing, because they are. And I think that is very clear. But it's just like a different approach to maybe how they're spending some of that downtime, where they're kind of getting their minds off of football. That was one thing. A few nuggets from the guys I talked to as well. Mike Hart has a couple really good freshmen coming in, Jordan Marshall and Micah Kaapana. He said Jordan Marshall is kind of like the next Blake Corum, and I was like, okay, well, there's my headline, so stay tuned for that story over on thewolverine.com. But he said Micah is really impressive too. I said to him, it feels like one of those classic Mike Hart finds, and he started laughing and said that he's super talented. He's not like some guy that should have been overlooked by any means, but the fact that Mike Hart was able to identify him, bring him here, I think was really good. Miles Hinton, Michigan senior offensive tackle, says he plans to return for next season. He's eyeing a starting job, and he kind of sees the path there for that. Our Chris Ballas talked to Carson Barnhart, wrote about this earlier, that he's planning on going to the NFL draft. So there's kind of one of your spots, right? Ladarius Henderson out of eligibility. So a couple tackle spots open, and you continue to hear good things about some of the young guys, Evan Link being one of them. Trente Jones could come back as well. Not sure what he's going to do. But, he could be a tackle. Miles Hinton could be a tackle. And then like an Andrew Gentry and Evan Link could be kind of the next guys in that two deep. But that's looking way ahead as well. Man, it was a whirlwind talking to a lot of guys within the program. But it was a fun one. Anything else that you have coming out of practice here and media day as we are less than 2 days before kickoff?
Well, to wrap up the practice thoughts, it dawned on me as we walked through that tunnel on the field level at SoFi Stadium that we were there at 2 p.m. local time. Rose Bowl kicks off 2 p.m. local time 2 days from when that happened. So we have definitely rounded the corner. I assume they're going to probably have some sort of walkthrough tomorrow. Blake Corum did tell me that they had a padded practice on Tuesday, I believe it was. But other than that, it's been shells. It's been the walkthrough type of stuff. So we'll see what happens there. I talked to tight ends coach Grant Newsome a little bit, knowing that the tight end is such a prominent part of the Michigan offense. Colston Loveland will be back next year as a junior, but Maybe a guy like A.J. Barner goes to the NFL draft and you have a lot of snaps up for grabs. We know they like to play 2 tight ends. A guy he likes a lot that he thinks can rise up into a bigger role over the next several months is Marlon Klein. He's a sophomore this year. And Zach Marshall as well, a freshman that both players in that position room and Grant Newsome today said is among one of the most well-read and well-studied guys when it comes to the playbook and film on this team. So guys to like there. The future seems bright at a lot of positions still, and we'll see what happens from there. But, piggybacking on Miles Hinton, I'll talk to Darius Henderson for a bit, who said, if Miles Hinton, you see the size, you see the tools. If he's able to come back, stay healthy, put it all together, he thinks he's a guy that could be a first-round type of talent next year. And maybe I'd tap the brakes on that a little bit. I think he'd settle right now for just being a quality Big Ten starter. But, there's a lot of, the pertinent info right now is what happens 2 days from now. But yes. What we get at these media days, we're starting to kind of look towards the future as well. And I get the sense that they feel like that window will stay open, given that you'll have younger guys that rise into these more prominent roles. And that's how you build a culture. That's how you get back to the college football playoffs. So, again, practice-wise, not a lot to glean. I think that's by design. It's a B-roll opportunity for us media types. But, again, you think of 2 years ago, and not to single anyone out, but there was a starting offensive lineman that I think put on 10, 15, 20 pounds between the end of the regular season and the college football playoff. I'm not seeing guys that are showing up looking a little, looking fluffy or a few extra pounds. Those guys look like they physically locked in. It sounds like they say they've mentally locked in. And a lot of people ask, too, like, what's, the change in approach? Is that just lip speak? Is it coach speak? We're not going to know until this game is over. And people will make their excuses or their explanations no matter what happens. But these guys are about as ready as they can be. And I think that's a positive.
And Harbaugh was asked about, just to wrap that kind of talk up, the change in approach. And he said, man, I'm surprised the guys even noticed. Like, I don't think it's like a total shift. So for fans out there that are like a little bit worried maybe about the lack of, physicality maybe in practice or whatever, I would not be worried about that. This is still a Jim Harbaugh team. They're going to do all those things. Perfect way to wrap it up, I think, is to go back to what you said about what's important. It's the Rose Bowl in 2 days. We can look ahead as fans and media at next year's team. That is well and good. We did that, and we will continue to report on kind of what this team's going to look like next season, because no matter what, the offseason is going to come. And at the very least, 10 days from now or 9 days from now, could be in a couple days. Obviously, we hope we're in Houston. I had a little chat with Jack Harbaugh on the sideline at practice today. It said, and as I was walking away, I said, hey, maybe we'll see you in Houston. He said, that is so far away. Focus only on the Rose Bowl. And I said, spoken like a true coach. I think that's the perfect way to sum it up, is that's all coming. Everything's out there for this team, but they got to win this one first, and it is going to be super exciting. So Clayton, Sayfie, Anthony Broome here from Los Angeles. Stay tuned at thewolverine.com for continued coverage of Michigan, Alabama in the Rose Bowl.